Danny was like, "You've got to do the show because this is capitalism."
I love Danny. Shout out Danny.
Yeah, Danny. This is Danny's choice. Some shows are my choice, and some are Danny's.
Okay.
And I was like, if it wasn't Zach, if it was just you, no offense.
No worries. All good.
But Zach's my boy. So.
Danny and I had a good call, I guess, several weeks ago now, and he asked me some hard questions. I hope you'll ask us some hard questions. I think we'll get into some, we'll get into some cool stuff. I know we won't agree on everything. I'm not hoping to change your mind necessarily. I'm just hoping we can look at maybe what a couple different scenarios for what the next 4 years of Bitcoin could look like, by the next halving.
You're bringing shitcoins to Bitcoin.
Shitcoins have already been brought to Bitcoin.
You're aggressively bringing Ethereum's world of shitcoins to Bitcoin.
We can get into it. We both want the world to be taken over, eaten up by Bitcoin. Black hole. It's always been a narrative in Bitcoin. It's a black hole. And I think that includes everything. So
it's what Rizzo told me, right?
I love Pete. I think he and I agree on like 98% of things. Yeah.
All right. So people know Zach. Zach used to have a podcast and gave up.
Hey, I'm not as good at it as you are. So.
Dude, your show was great.
It was a little hobby, for a little bit.
Your show was great. But Willem, people might not know you as much. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sounds good. So Willem, grew up in Belgium. Bit of a mathematics background. Came to international mathematics competition. Ended up doing electrical engineering.
Hold on. You did what?
Mathematics when I was younger.
No, you were in a competition.
Yeah, national mathematics competition.
Where did you come?
Third.
So is that in an age group or all kids?
No, it's like bracketed, like 2 years from like high school.
So you're like the third best at maths at your age in the country?
Yeah.
Bronze medalist?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then ended up doing electrical engineering, bachelor's, master's, focused on cryptography. So researched in authenticated encryption. Actually, part of the design, what's now called the Spiderchain, which is how we built the layer 2, comes from my cryptography background. Saw Bitcoin in my cryptography classes, but didn't see the macro picture yet. Actually, one of my friends I studied together with is one of the main engineers of Liquid. So that's funny how that turned out. Then ended up working in chemicals for a few years, lived in Saudi Arabia for a year and a half. Saw hyperinflation happening in Lebanon. Saw people get their bank account seized. Fully, very quickly put everything together. Then went on to do my MBA at the Harvard Business School. So I moved to the US, moved to Boston. And that's where I think like now 2 years ago, put together the vision for what's now called Botanix. And that vision is still exactly the same. Basically saw Bitcoin being the winning money, the most pure, decentralized, secure money. But then I saw a lot of applications reaching product market fit outside of Bitcoin and realized they're all built on what you call virtual machines. Now, virtual machines are what I call a software layer. It's more an operating system. And so, for example, you have Simplicity, you've got the EVM, Ethereum Virtual Machine, you've got the Solana VM, Solana Virtual Machine. And these are all just software layers. There's no tokens in there, there's no assets in there. This is just an execution environment. And I realized that actually this is a new software technology battle, very similar to like Windows in the 80s. Windows won out not because it was the best, nor because it was the most secure, but had the biggest distribution. And so the EVM, in my mind, has the biggest distribution. And so I wanted to build an EVM on top of Bitcoin. But again, like the EVMs, like no tokens in there, it fully runs on Bitcoin. And then basically wanted to build that in a decentralized fashion. I'm what I call a decentralization maxi. Went deep into the cryptography again, was living in Boston, met a lot of people around there, looked at a lot of different designs, looked at a lot of layer 2 designs on Ethereum, on a different roll-up, so they're downsides are actually very centralized. I wanted to build a decentralized layer 2 and spent 6 months into the cryptography, came up with what's now called the Spiderchain, and then, started building. Now I'm here.
Okay. So define product market fit. You said things have reached product market fit. What had? And
Yes, I think there's quite a few applications that have reached product market fit.
Okay.
Most obvious one is stablecoins.
Yes.
This brings a huge amount of value to so many people in the world. We've seen that play out. Outside of that, I also started seeing what you call, the tokens. So the tokens are what I call more like stocks. So when I try to envision a world, 100 years from now that fully runs on Bitcoin. where every money in every aspect of the whole world is done in Bitcoin, right? And then I saw tokens more like stocks. So what you have today is like, if you want to buy a stock, you need to go to a broker, and you can buy Apple stock. Why does someone in Lebanon, for example, cannot buy all the stocks in the US? And so I saw actually now we're more like back in the 1900s, where everyone could launch their own company. Everybody was selling on the corner of the streets their shares, like buy my company, right? You had promoters, a lot of scams, resulted in the 1930s, the crash, SEC was formed, right? I feel now, right now we're in that position in the 1900s where everybody can launch their own token. There's lots of scams, lots of marketing plays, but basically everybody can launch their token and dump it on retail, right? However, you look at the technology, you can see actually a world where you have DEXs. So decentralized exchanges are, in my mind, stock exchanges. It's a better version than a New York Stock Exchange. It's open 24/7, it's fully permissionless, and you can basically trade on there, and nobody can stop you from that. Now, the tokens we've seen are, of course, mostly scams, and mostly, just to like make a quick buck. But I can see a world that basically you launch your stock on basically as tokens on blockchain, and you use Bitcoin to buy those. And so I've seen decentralized exchanges reach product market fit. I've seen perp dexes, so perpetual dexes, so you can leverage Bitcoin 2x, 5x, or whatever you want to do. But I want that to be on Bitcoin. Like, in my mind, Bitcoin as money has won. But I want to see the whole world run on Bitcoin, including the financial system, including stock markets, including stocks itself. Then we've seen loans. So basically, you can take out loans on Ethereum against your wrapped Bitcoin, which I think has a lot of different gaps. But you want to take out loans. It's an important part of a financial system, and so I think that those lending and borrowing protocols have reached product market fit. It's part of what you call DeFi. So I think DeFi have reached product market fit. And then I think NFTs have survived. NFTs, of course, started on Bitcoin, but then went to Ethereum and now has been all over the place. It's now come back to Bitcoin, of course. But it's still a part of human culture. People seem to like NFTs. And so you've seen a lot of applications reach product market fit.
So you think tokens, meme coins, are actually just a precursor to have an equity?
Yes.
On chain?
When I try to think 100 years ahead, I think all stocks will just be tokens on ideally a full scaling on Bitcoin.
Interesting. I mean, the interesting part of that is being able to trade 24/7.
And no counterparty risk. Like right now, you have these broker risks. Some central party can rule everything. People can decide. Like, this is a better version of what we have today.
There would be a regulatory hurdle to some of that, though. You could technically do it, but there will be regulatory hurdles. I don't think just because you could issue equity on a blockchain that the SEC is going to go, great, go ahead, go do this.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that's where the global aspect comes into play. You've got, of course, Balaji and the network state, and you can start seeing that someone can launch their token in every country in the world. And so, that will definitely be a regulatory battle, I assume. But before the 1930s, before the SEC existed, you didn't have that. And so you can question if that's good or bad, but I can see it play out that everyone anywhere in the world can launch their own company because we've seen it play out. It's been mostly scams, but that's how I think the most logical answer is for the
it has played on my mind. My football club, I've had over 700 people fill in the form on the website saying, "Can I invest?" There's an investment section. Over 700, and numerous people in person asking.
And why can't they invest?
Well, I mean, it's just are they investing as private investors? Are we going public this early? None of it kind of makes sense. But the idea of, I don't know, creating 100,000 tokens, which are representations of shares, which represents ownership of the club in somehow, and that we can maybe issue dividends against those tokens with the options to buy back tokens if we want to, or issue more. It's a lot more fluid. It's something I could do in probably an afternoon on my own. But again, it's the regulatory side. And so, for example, when you hold Bitcoin, when I have Bitcoin itself is contained within the protocol and has value. So when I have it, I have essentially that bearer instrument. If I have a token that represents shares in a football club, what it represents sits outside of the protocol. So how do you enforce ownership? You still need the legal framework to enforce ownership.
Correct.
So it's like, what are the regulatory hurdles to this? Is it a change to the laws that allows you to be able to take essentially a company public on a blockchain as such? What are your disclosure requirements? Yada yada. So it's a different mechanism. I'm not against it. It's just, are we actually changing the rules, or are we just making it easier to trade? I mean, it's cool being able to trade. Look, imagine here, I was like, oh yeah, Peter, damn, I want to buy some Rail Bedford equity. I'm like, oh, I've got some here on my phone. Like, yeah, send me some Bitcoin. I'll send you some.
Yeah.
That would be cool as fuck.
No, absolutely. I think that's where I hope things go. And yeah, regulatory framework runs way behind. But you also saw that with Bitcoin. Doesn't mean it's bad. Exactly what you explained is a way more fair and equal world where anyone in the world can invest because they like what you're doing, and they can't today because of regulatory reasons. Like even in the SEC, after the SEC was formed, there was a lot of pushback because now only the rich people could invest in stocks. Why is that? That doesn't make any sense. And yeah, we have to
That's protect, for rich people.
Yeah, exactly. We have to protect like the small person, but do they actually need that protection is a question. And
bro, it's all bullshit. Literally, it's all bullshit. You can download 100 gambling apps and bet on every sport and go broke.
Exactly. So I think that's a fair world, and so I think that has reached product market fit. But ideally, I want that whole thing to run on Bitcoin. So I want the whole financial system to run on Bitcoin. I want loans. I want stocks. I want stock exchanges. I want banks, not as centralized banks, but as banks on Bitcoin, and ideally more trustless.
What do you mean by run on Bitcoin, though? Because you're not building this into the protocol level.
Not on the base layer, but basically like a Botanix. So we run the EVM. So on us, you can copy paste like a Uniswap or any application you have on Ethereum. Really, you can copy paste that. You deploy it on Botanix, and Botanix is like a second layer EVM on Bitcoin where there's only Bitcoin.
Explain EVM to people listening who don't know what that is.
So EVM is Ethereum Virtual Machine. It is basically an execution environment where you say, it is an account model compared to like Bitcoin's UTXO model. In your account model, you can have assets and you can transfer assets and you can build smart contracts. And so these smart contracts can do a bunch of different things. And we've seen that now, like the DEXs are basically an immutable smart contract that lives in there. You can never change that. And that's how it works.
So are you executing things on Ethereum, or have you just taken their code to do it yourselves?
No, the EVM is separate of like Ethereum, the blockchain. The EVM is just the execution environment. So you take that, the virtual machine, and you plug that in Botanix. We're in no way connected to Ethereum at all.
Oh, okay. So Botanix is just its own protocol.
Yeah.
Or Spiderchain.
The Spiderchain that runs on Bitcoin. And then basically we're layer 2. So the Spiderchain allows you to bridge from Bitcoin, the base layer, to Botanix, the second layer. And then you'll have the Bitcoin on the second layer. It's like a sidechain, like Liquid in the beginning. And then basically you have the Bitcoin, Liquid Bitcoin, and then you can use it in any application.
Okay, so let's run through this technically. So when you say you've built it on Bitcoin, it's a second layer. How do you mean it's built on Bitcoin?
Yeah.
What does that built on Bitcoin? Define that built on Bitcoin.
It means that the token or the asset you use in the whole protocol is Bitcoin. It means you inherit a lot of the security from Bitcoin. Like this protocol couldn't work without Bitcoin.
Explain that. So explain that so I understand. So how are you using Bitcoin within that protocol?
Very good question. Maybe I'll first explain how the Spiderchain from a very high level works, and then things will become more clear. So very quickly, I'm going to go over what the Lightning Network is from a very high level perspective. So the Lightning Network, because that was actually the inspiration for the Spiderchain, the Lightning Network from a very high level perspective is this decentralized network of 2 out of 2 multisigs. When you and I open a channel, that's a 2 out of 2 multisig. When Zack and I open a channel, that's a 2 out of 2 multisig. And so from a very high level, the Lightning Network is this interesting overlay network of 2 out of 2 multisigs, right? And so park the idea of the Lightning Network now, but then think bigger. So what the Spiderchain is we create this decentralized network of multisigs. And so, for example, if you have 10,000 different full nodes, or 100,000 full nodes, what you will do is create this series of multisig. So multisig 1, you will randomly choose 100 participants out of the 10,000, and they will secure multisig 1. And then you do that again. You create a new one. Again, you randomly choose 100 participants out of 10,000, and they will secure multisig 2. And then you do that again for multisig 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And after a while, you have this whole network of decentralized multisigs. That's where the actual Bitcoin will sit in.
Okay.
And then you need a consensus because you're plugging in the EVM. So you run a proof of stake consensus. And I used to be a very proof of work maximalist, so this is very interesting. But a proof of stake on a second layer is totally different than a proof of stake on the base layer. So you will stake Bitcoin on Bitcoin, and that secures the EVM. So each one of the full nodes of the 10,000 full nodes or participants will have to stake Bitcoin to operate in this multisig network, and that will secure the EVM.
Okay. Why 10,000?
I think 10,000 is like a good number to be very decentralized.
And how much Bitcoin will you need to become one of these participants?
The exact number is still not fully defined. It's probably 5 Bitcoin or higher.
Are you? Okay. Is this how you're going to launch? Is this how you seed it with liquidity?
No, in the beginning, we launched as a federated sidechain. So like a liquid, but
Okay.
instead of using simplicity as the execution environment, we use the EVM execution environment.
Okay, but why do you need these 10,000 people? If you've already launched, why change this model to these 10,000?
Oh, because Liquid has like 15 as a federation, and I think we should go higher than 15. The idea has always been that how I see scaling Bitcoin to 8 billion people is you have Bitcoin on the base layer, very slow blocks, 10 minutes, extremely secure, extremely decentralized, can be run by every person in the world. And then you go to a second layer, can be run by every company in the world. So 5 Bitcoin is not going to be for every person in the world, but could be run by every company in the world. And ideally, you want that to be fully decentralized, and you might want to have like more than 1,000 nodes.
Right. Okay. So this is how you get. This is your decentralization.
Correct.
Your decentralization is okay. I understand it. Okay. But when are you launching this part, by the way? How are you going to find these 10,000 people?
Oh, so we're going to start with 15.
Oh, you're going to start with 15.
Yeah. So you start with 15. Those 15 partners are being selected from both the Bitcoin side and Ethereum side. Ethereum side, you have a lot of stakers and staking companies that have been professionally staking, so they'll run part. But we'll have 15 different parties. So we will run one out of the 15. And so from the beginning, and this is more for the Ethereum layer 2 people, we'll have decentralized sequencers, basically. And then you go from there, and then you want to expand from 15 to like 100, and then go beyond that.
Right. Okay. I'm marginally following this. Okay. I mean, technicals aside, me as a user, which is the bit I always really care about. If I want to use Spiderchain, I want to use it. It's because I want to use a service on it, right? I want to say I wanted to use the loan facility, or I wanted to issue a stable coin, maybe.
Super easy.
Super easy. How do I do it? Do I have to? Am I essentially pegging Bitcoin in?
Yeah. So what you do is you will peg into the Spiderchain and get the Bitcoin back on the EVM.
So it's just like Liquid.
It's like Liquid.
Yeah, it's an IOU for real Bitcoin.
But it's different trust assumptions than a Liquid. But basically, then you have the Bitcoin in your MetaMask, right?
Huh.
And then think of everything you have on Ethereum, and you can copy paste any smart contract you have.
But I don't. Sorry, because I think language is important.
Yeah.
I don't have Bitcoin in my MetaMask. I have a representation of Bitcoin in my MetaMask.
Yes.
Yeah, because in that Bitcoin is in a multi-sig somewhere.
In this network
You
of
can't
decentralized
take
multisigs.
Bitcoin out of the Bitcoin protocol.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So even with Liquid Bitcoin or any other sidechain, the token you're given in return, whatever you call it, isn't Bitcoin. Even if you say it's a representation, it's an IOU.
It's representation, part of the decentralized network, but a little bit like Lightning. Lightning is different because you have your own UTXO, but like what sits on the Lightning is also a representation of what sits on Bitcoin, the base layer.
What would the argument be that a Lightning person would say, no, this is different. Lightning's different.
Oh, Lightning is different because there's two properties that Lightning has that no other layer 2 has. It's decentralized, and you basically have a direct mapping of the UTXOs back to Bitcoin base layer. But that's a limit. It is cool because you have the UTXO yourself. You still have control of that. But it basically puts a limit how much you can scale it. Like one of the realizations I had, and once you go deep into the cryptography, is like you cannot scale Bitcoin, the base layer, or the UTXOs to 8 billion people.
So strictly speaking, Lightning sats on Lightning Network are just a token representation of the sats that actually exist within the multisig when you open the channel.
Well, the best way to see that is when you have sats, you can go below sats, right? You can have 0.1 sats. That's not possible on Bitcoin, the base layer.
But it is. That's what I'm saying. Is when when I convert Bitcoin into Sats on the Lightning Network, I'm not actually using Bitcoin, right? I'm using a token that exists within the Lightning Network, which is a representation of some of the Sats that are in that multisig.
Yeah, it depends on what you call a token, but since it's all code. The code is just a series of numbers. Correct.
Yeah, it's a funny one, really, because I've never really thought it through in that level of detail, but I can imagine a lot of people coming into Bitcoin when they start using Bitcoin. Maybe they have a wallet that supports base chain and Sats. They think it's the same thing. They think those Sats are just Sats that are in Bitcoin. They don't think through that like it's essentially a token representation of Sats.
It's semi. The trust model is totally different because with the Lightning Network, you do have your keys to your own UTXOs. So you'll always be able to like unilaterally exit to the base layer.
So why doesn't anyone else do that? Do the same? Because I think that's why Lightning as a layer 2 is kind of seen more like a native layer 2 to Bitcoin. Whereas I think all the others, these kind of ones, are kind of seen as like things you just peg in and out of. Even though it's kind of the same thing, you're locking up Bitcoin to have a token on another platform. I think the Lightning Network is considered like the native Bitcoin sidechain.
Yeah, because it's more native.
Is it a sidechain? Is Lightning a sidechain?
No, Lightning is more like an overlay network. So
okay.
In my opinion, Lightning Network is the only L2. All the rest are sidechains.
Okay.
But the difference with Lightning is you have your UTXO, which is like your wallet with like your private key. And when you open a channel, you'll always have access to that. So it's really yours.
So why is nobody else building their sidechains with access to the UTXO? Because it seems like it's a more credible thing to do in the world of Bitcoin.
Correct. But it also has a lot of limitations. So actually, you first want to do that, but I realized the EVM, I came to the realization that the EVM might be the winning virtual machine as a software layer.
Right.
And the EVM is account model and Bitcoin is UTXO model. So you need to switch from UTXO model to account model. You cannot translate the account model back to a UTXO model.
Okay.
On top of that, you have the limitations of scaling the UTXOs to 8 billion people.
Yes. Okay, that's fair. Okay. So how do I get rugged in this system? What's the rug model? What's the threat?
The threat model is, in the beginning, it's a federation assumption. So basically, like a liquid, you will have 15 functionaries. They can all come together and say, like, look, we're going to steal all the Bitcoin. So you need 15 different legal entities spread around the world to come together and decide to steal everyone.
Okay, fine. Have you got your entities?
That list is like half complete.
Okay.
We're doing great DD on them.
And so, sorry, I know you've already explained this. I'm slow with this stuff. How are you different from Liquid?
From a trust model, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
How are we different from like a user perspective? Massive difference. So Liquid uses a different virtual machine, and basically we use the EVM. So now you can copy paste anything you have on Ethereum and you deploy it on top of us. But from a technical and trust model, it's exactly the same as Liquid in the beginning. Over time, the Spiderchain will come into play and will be actually decentralized. We want to go from that 15 to that 10,000 day one. Same trust model as Liquid.
Right. Okay. This stuff's complicated.
It's fun stuff. I think from like a historical perspective, people have tried to build cool stuff on Bitcoin, since the beginning. A lot of the DeFi stuff that we talked about, people may disagree. Your listeners may disagree on whether they found product market fit or not, but people use them.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of this stuff started on Bitcoin. Building on Bitcoin isn't easy. So then they kind of migrated to Ethereum, and then people started building on Solana and all the other chains. But like our vision, I know one of the things at least we all have in common is we love Bitcoin more than anything. And I want the world to run on Bitcoin, for Bitcoin to be this like all-encompassing, disruptive black hole force that takes over the global financial system. And like Bitcoin as a hard money, as a tool for payments, those are like very core use cases, but it's not the full picture. Like Bitcoin is designed to be the internet of money. That's a very broad mandate. Like that encompasses a lot of stuff. And I think we've seen a lot of that stuff built on other networks. People enjoy using it on other chains, but all this stuff started on Bitcoin originally. NFTs, stablecoins, DEXs, you name it, wrapped assets, and we want to kind of bring that back to Bitcoin. And if you don't like something in the market, which I know maybe a lot of your listeners don't like a lot of these other chains, the way to defeat it is to outcompete it and build something that's better. And I want that to be built on Bitcoin.
Well, listen, look, we're talking about freedom and capitalism, right? Mm-hmm. I think you can hold multiple truths at the same time. You can hold a truth that Bitcoin is the only thing you want to use. You only want to use the Bitcoin protocol or the Lightning Network. You've got no interest in DeFi, yada, yada. But you can also hold the other truth is that other people do, and you can't stop that.
Yeah.
And you're not going to stop it. I mean, so like sometimes I've been in the battle, and other times I'm like, well, what's the fucking point? There's like millions of people around the world who want to do this stuff, and they're not stopping.
Yeah, I mean, there's 8 billion people in the world. Some of them will only have an interest in Bitcoin for peer-to-peer censorship-resistant payments. But a lot of them want to do other stuff with their digital asset, and they're not choosing Bitcoin. In some cases, they're choosing Ether and Solana and whatever, because whatever they may want to do in crypto is not really built well on Bitcoin right now. And I think, I already can see the tweets coming out of this episode from like some of the commentary we're having.
What shitcoin did.
but I think it's for most of Bitcoin's history, the goal has been to try and build all this stuff on Bitcoin. And like altcoins existed in many cases as like not very serious projects. Like maybe they'll build something cool and we can just bring it back to Bitcoin. And then that narrative kind of got lost, and now people don't really try to build this cool stuff on Bitcoin anymore. They're happy with the base layer and the Lightning Network. And I think Bitcoin's mandate to separate money and state, to disrupt an entire fiat financial system, and to act as the internet of money, that's very broad. And that encompasses a lot more than just what the Bitcoin base layer can do and what the Lightning Network can do.
I keep struggling with this built on Bitcoin thing as well, just as a term.
Okay.
Because these things, they're built... It's almost like they're built above Bitcoin. Not on. I think built on Bitcoin implies to me, language-wise, it sounds like it's built into the protocol. It's built on Bitcoin.
I see.
But really what it is it's people are building separate entities that use the value of Bitcoin. They essentially create a vault to lock up the value of Bitcoin, so you can use that value elsewhere as long as you trust the peg in, peg out model.
Sure.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I think Adam, you've had Adam back on the show a lot of times. Adam talks about this a lot. Like you don't want to, in the sense that you're referring build on Bitcoin, you don't want all this stuff built on the base layer.
No.
In fact, like trying to build more stuff on the base layer is just going to have an overflow effect and push it up into layer 2s, layer 3s, whatever. Elizabeth Stark talks about this too. Like you can build layer 3s, 4s, whatever on Lightning Network and others of these like adjacent protocols, maybe generally we can call them. And that's kind of how the system should evolve. Like not all of it built on the Bitcoin base layer. In fact, most of it probably not built on the Bitcoin base layer. You want to build new systems on and around powered by Bitcoin. And yeah, they'll all have different trust assumptions. They'll all have different developer experiences and user experiences. And that's kind of what you want it to be in terms of like the ecosystem built around Bitcoin. You don't want people and users and this like permissionless finance being pushed over to Ethereum and Solana. I mean, some people obviously like that. They don't want any of this stuff having anything to do with Bitcoin. But I think that's short-sighted. And if this stuff isn't powered by Bitcoin, if Bitcoin isn't the epicenter for permissionless global decentralized finance, I think that's probably more of a failure than a victory for Bitcoin.
Yeah, sorry, just to say, we have peg in and peg, not peg in, Jesus. We have peg in and peg out in real life as well. When you go to a casino, you go to Vegas,
sure.
You peg in with your dollars, they give you a bunch of chips, and if you got in at the end, you peg out by getting your dollars back. I know that's like a more of an analog version of it, but also if us three had a game of poker each, we put one Bitcoin on an open dime each, we'd essentially peg out with the tokens, play the game, and the winner walks away with the Bitcoin. So it's really, the reason that game of poker works is if we don't have those open dimes, we've just got useless tokens. Because they're backed by those open dimes and real money, we can have a real game. And so what you're doing is it's the value of the underlying Bitcoin that's making, it's basically it's like you're recognizing two things. There are people in the world who want to use what's been built on crypto networks. That's a reality.
Yeah.
But you want to use Bitcoin as the base token within these use cases, because that's where the real value is. And Ethereum and Solana will trend to zero against Bitcoin.
Well, because it's the best money ever made.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to use
it's
dollars.
Only one winner.
I don't want to
Exactly.
use Ether. I don't want to use dollars. I want to use Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's the end goal for me.
Yeah, Bitcoin has the money for the whole world. Everything that you do, you pay in Bitcoin. And to that note, like I want that peg in and peg out system to be as decentralized as possible. So ideally, you have an overlay or like a second layer, or if you want to call it a sidechain, as decentralized as possible with as least trust assumptions as possible. And I actually want to go a bit further than what Zach said as well. We don't want that everything comes back to Bitcoin. It's actually needed, in my opinion. Like if we get stuck with Bitcoin as a store of value, we're very much at risk. Like I just got back to Hong Kong, spoke with a lot of people, and they share the same vision. If 90% of all the Bitcoin ends up with central banks and ETFs, then we've lost. We need to create a system where you don't have just centralized parties. We need to create an actual system that is running in some type of way, gets its security in some type of way without trust assumptions from other different parties. So everything that's built outside of Bitcoin reaches product market fit. We have to bring that in some kind of trustless version back to Bitcoin.
Why now? Why now has there been this explosion of these layer twos?
I guess I can start. So I would push back on that. There's a bunch of ways to answer that. First, I would say it's really not now in terms of like the whole history of Bitcoin. Like we were talking about a couple minutes ago, people have tried to build stuff like this on Bitcoin for a while. You even had like Satoshi before he left Bitcoin, he was working on Namecoin. And then you had like the blockchain researchers in 2014, 2015 working on early research and versions of Liquid. You also had like OmniLayer and Counterparty and all of those in there. And then you had the Lightning Network come along, and then you had Rootstock come along. And then like around like 2019, that sort of progression of people trying to build new stuff around Bitcoin, like layer twos, however you want to define that label, it kind of stopped. And I think, I don't know if you know Kyle Torpy. He's like an OG Bitcoiner.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Kyle's the man.
Kyle's great.
So around that time, he wrote an article that was basically like, he asked the question, like, where is this stuff? Like for all these, like since Satoshi working on Namecoin to Lightning Network, Liquid, Rootstock, we've tried to build all this stuff. And like, so like, what do we have to show for it? Like, where is all of this stuff? And it kind of went nowhere. Like people, there were cultural shifts in Bitcoin that, more ardently opposed building DeFi on Bitcoin than previously in Bitcoin's history. You had a couple other factors like DeFi summer around 2020, where like the Ethereum ecosystem kind of took off in crazy ways. And then also you had COVID, which kind of put a lot of this building around Bitcoin on the shelves, and people only wanted Bitcoin as store value, maybe an inflation hedge. You had the sailors of the world enter the space, and that became the dominant narrative. So there are some reasons for why like this latest generation of layer 2 sidechains, whatever, is appearing. but also it's not really new. It's just something that should be revived and has been like a fixture of most of Bitcoin's history in various ways, shapes, and forms. And then just kind of there was this like stagnation period where that desire to build stuff on and around powered by Bitcoin kind of just got put on pause.
Look, I get the value in that. I don't use Solana. I don't use Ethereum.
Me neither. Well, I use Ethereum, but not Solana.
No, but I just don't.
But you don't want to use a blockchain that can just shut off sometimes, right?
Yeah, and I just there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to focus on. I don't have time to learn all this bullshit. But the idea, but I do know there is a demand for DeFi, whether Bitcoin maxis like it or not.
Sure.
And I do know there's a demand for stable coins, and I always defend them, whether you want to call them a fiat coin, whatever, because they're not stable. I mean, whatever. There is a demand and a use case for them. I get all of this. And so this, because I was thinking, well, if you can do all this stuff on Ethereum, why aren't you guys just doing it on Ethereum? But the truth is you want it built with the value coming from the hardest asset in the world.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Adam Back talks about this a lot. Sorry, I wanted you to answer his question about why now also, but Adam and I disagree on some things, but one thing I know we agree on, because he talks about it a lot too, is like you said, people will build this stuff. Not everyone will like it. A lot of people, I think, will like it, like these applications and whatever. But so given that kind of as an assumption, it is going to happen. You want to give people the best foundation to build on. And like Saylor says, there's no second best. That's Bitcoin. So if people are going to build this, you want to try and create an environment where they can build it with the hardest money on the best base layer. Otherwise, like they've already lost before they started. If they're building on a second or third best base layer, it's a failed project from the start.
Did you want to answer? Why now?
Yeah, I think how I saw it happen is there's a few things coming together. Both from technology side, we had Taproot. Like designs like this wasn't possible before Taproot. Besides that, we had actually all those applications reaching product market fit on Ethereum. I think DeFi before 2020 wasn't really like, was it going to work? Maybe, maybe not. Stablecoins took off. DeFi really happened. And so it was clear market demand. Technology changed, like we had Taproot upgrade. And all of these things came together. And before that, after the block size war, I think a lot of developers went to Ethereum. It's super easy to build on Ethereum. Like you build a Solidity smart contract, that's it. Try building on Bitcoin, like it's really hard. Bitcoin is not easy. It's a very adversarial environment. And so when I look at actually like the amount of developers in the world, there's like probably 100,000 or 1 million Solidity developers. There's maybe a few hundreds that can develop on Bitcoin itself. And so a lot of the developers went to Ethereum, but they still like Bitcoin. Actually, very interestingly, I talked to a lot of founders of Ethereum dApps that are OG Bitcoiners, that are real Bitcoiners. They still like Bitcoin. They would want to come back, but they couldn't build on Bitcoin. And so now you see that wave coming back, which I think I really like.
Yeah, that's what Rizzo spoke to me about. His belief that Bitcoin will end up sucking all of this up.
100%.
I think another concern comes from is the number of hacks that happen on these platforms, these DeFi applications. You hear of bridges. The bridge was hacked. This loan product, 140 million was stolen from fucking Beaver loans or whatever it is. Like this it seems to happen a lot, and always at the end of that, there's a bunch of people who just fucking lost their money. Like the thing I like about Bitcoin is I'm nearly 100% sure my multi-sig is never getting hacked, and no one can get that from me. I'm like 95% there on my like single, hardware wallet. Maybe I can get $5 wrench attacked on that. But I'm very confident on that. I'm even fairly confident on like some of my custodial, Lightning wallets on my phone, like Wallet Satoshi. But like. But I looked at what's that project that Eric Voorhees does? Like Thorchain. So I wanted to get a Bitcoin loan. Mm-hmm. And so, if you look at Unchained or Ledger, you're going to be paying these like 12, 14, 16% interest rates. They're fucking high, right? And then Thorchain, I would say, is like 0% or something. Ridiculous. Like it's insane. And I looked at it and said, well, why am I paying 14% here when I can pay 0% there. And the reason being is I don't understand. I understand this 14%. Here, you've got my Bitcoin over there and I'm paying 14%. And then if I pay it back, I'm getting it back. But this chain here, I'm like, I've got to deposit on this chain and I've got to read about all their rules about how they kind of like manage their, the value of the token. Can it do what happened with Luna? Like, I have to think through a lot of these things. I went, I just don't fucking trust. I don't know.
Sure.
I've seen too many things go wrong that I just don't know. What gives you confidence you won't 6 months in, a year in, start seeing this shit happen on your platform?
That's a very good question. I think that's also why in the beginning of the pitch I said the EVM is definitely not the most secure. I think everybody realizes the EVM was the first virtual machine or one of the first and gets hacked a lot. It's really hard to build a Solidity smart contract that's secure. Now, on the other hand, you could argue, wait, it might have the biggest Lindy effect because it's been around the most and actually gave rise to a massive audit industry. Like there's a huge audit industry that's being built and there's so many auditing companies that audit Solidity smart contracts.
So when a smart contract gets hacked, does it get hacked because I don't want to say it's been poorly coded, but it could have been poorly coded. It could have a bug in it. It could have something they've not considered, right? But are there times where it can be coded correctly and still get hacked because there's some new kind of hack that somebody didn't know about?
No, the typical other way to these hacks typically happen is basically when you have a smart contract that is not immutable, which means there is a set of multi-sig keys that can change the contract. And so some smart contracts on Ethereum just have actually a company behind it, and there's a certain set of people that actually have the keys to that smart contract. If those keys get stolen, or get hacked, then basically the hackers can change the smart contract and it's over.
Is that what happens on all of these hacks?
No, some are just like smart contracts that have been badly coded. So those are the two typical big attack factors.
So with correct auditing, can you have a smart contract that 100% can't be hacked?
There's no such thing as 100%.
Okay.
But for example, the Uniswap smart contract is immutable and has been around for quite a few years.
Never been hacked.
Never been hacked. So those are the ones that you can like 99% sure trust. Even in Bitcoin, you're never 100% sure that there's no hack possible. In 2018, we had this vulnerability that got solved. It's part of like the longer something exists, the more sure you can be that it's actually secure.
And how do you communicate this this kind of security to somebody? Because like I say, like Thorchain for me, I was like, oh God, it's just like a nightmare. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go to Ledden.
Yeah, no, very good question. I think you have to be very honest about what the trust assumptions are in a lot of different models. Like with a liquid, you know what the trust assumptions are. You have to be clear what people are getting into. And it's like you said, everything is a trade-off. There's nothing more secure than a Bitcoin in a hardware wallet on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That is the most safe thing you can have. Now, of course, if you want to take a loan, you have a lot of protocols on Ethereum in Ethereum DeFi where you can take a loan and you can probably trust your smart contract. But the risk there is then your wrapped Bitcoin, which is a centralized asset. So there's still a bunch of different risks.
Explain the risk with wrapped Bitcoin.
Oh, so wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum actually shows how much market demand there is. There's like $10 billion of wrapped Bitcoin, but it is a centralized party. It's BitGo. That's, I think, New York based. That basically custodies all the actual Bitcoin, which for us as based in the US is probably okay. But if you, for example, someone, I don't know, in Hong Kong or anywhere else in the world, you run the risk that the US government says like, oh, we're going to seize the assets of Bitcoin. And that basically puts a big risk on top of your trade-off, right?
We're going to end up with an environment which is very similar to the real world in that someone like my father is very conservative with his money. He has his bank account and he has his pension and he keeps records of everything and prints everything out and has folders of everything. And he knows when everything is going to be renewed.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad. So that's kind of how I was going to answer you.
He's like the Bitcoin maximalist version of an. Yeah.
And I don't think that conservatism is a bad outcome at all. Like, because if you look at traditional finance, like there's vulnerabilities too, also like data leaks, like financial losses. And and obviously that stuff happens in DeFi, whatever you want to call it, all the time. I think also there's kind of a time element to consider. Like prime time for DeFi has kind of only been like the past 4 years or so. Like it's very, very, very new.
Yeah. Can I just finish my thought though?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
It's just to say that, my dad, he has a mortgage, but everything else, if he could not afford to buy it, he didn't buy. He wouldn't get loans. He's very traditional. He's very conservative in that way. Whereas I'm his son and I'm fucking degenerate. Like everything I've built, I've done on leverage. You know, whether it's a bank loan or a car loan, and I've just done that because I'm will take more risks than him. And I think that's basically the difference between like a Bitcoin maxi and other Bitcoiners, in that like they'll call you a shitcoiner, Zach.
They already do.
But I've known you for a long time. I know you're a Bitcoiner. You've just got a different model for how you want to use your Bitcoin. Yeah. And you're willing to maybe take a little bit of risk by putting it onto a Spiderchain and taking a loan. Whereas they may be a little bit more conservative and want to go to lead or just not borrow against it at all. But it's just different models for how you want to use your Bitcoin. And the thing is like, I didn't care for this show. It was Danny, right? But I was going to do it. But I think we're naive to not accept there's a world of people out there who want to use their Bitcoin in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to people who don't want to use their Bitcoin this way, the one thing I would say is pretty much the exact same thing I'd say to people who don't want to use Bitcoin at all. Like,
don't then.
If you don't like Bitcoin, if you don't think it's important or necessary, like I disagree with you, but don't use it. If you don't like things built on Bitcoin, if you think it's stupid, I'm not going to force you to use it. Like you don't have to. I think the number of people who will want to use it is quite large, but it doesn't have to include you. Like you don't have to use it. And that's kind of the beauty of Bitcoin. Sorry for interrupting you earlier. I kind of see that outcome as like a little more conservative trend in personal finance as being, kind of inevitable, because like traditional finance, data security, that whole world is very insecure. A lot of the DeFi stuff, for different reasons, also very insecure. So as like individuals, I hope, we kind of become a little more conservative with where and how much capital we allocate to new apps, new products, experimental financial tools, all this stuff. I would love to see all of it built on Bitcoin. And I think maxis may already hate me by this point in the show, but I think they can resonate with kind of, we should be a little more conservative with how we use our Bitcoin. I want to use Bitcoin for everything. Maybe they don't want to, but in general, all these different use cases, people should be more conservative and careful because there are risks, and you like losing Bitcoin is irreversible, and you want to avoid that. But at the same time, and I don't think it's inconsistent to say that I think the entire financial system, the fiat financial system, should be replaced with a financial system running on Bitcoin, powered by Bitcoin, using Bitcoin. A little more conservative, a little bit less degenerate and fiat focused. But that's where I see Bitcoin in 100 years, and that's what I want to build.
What main criticisms have you got so far?
Well, there's a few, I guess. Like, which one do you want to start with?
It's very interesting because they keep changing over the last 2 years. 2 years ago, when we started, I think, so I was always a big Bitcoiner. And basically, I realized that the EVM might be there as a winning virtual machine. And the biggest criticism was like, wait, Ethereum? It's like, they don't want to do anything with that. After now, I think most people realize that the EVM is just a virtual machine and it's not connected to Ethereum. I think now probably the biggest pushback is on bringing a lot of tokens to Bitcoin, where I think it's.
But
I don't think that is bringing tokens to Bitcoin.
It's already here.
Well, so that's what I would say is the biggest criticism we've received is which we were talking about Bitcoin history a couple minutes ago. Yeah. Kind of how I see a shift in the narrative, because people they say literally, don't do this on Bitcoin. Leave it on Ethereum. Leave it on Solana. And that's a pretty big shift from how Bitcoin's goal has always been. Like anything that if these altcoins, they're mostly useless. If they create anything cool, it should be very trivial to kind of adapt it, copy paste it, bring it back to Bitcoin, because we want Bitcoin to be the best. It already is the best. We're trying to build stuff with Bitcoin as the focus. But now the narrative among certain types of Bitcoin people is we don't even want that on Bitcoin. Like leave all these applications, anything besides basically payment channels, leave it on other chains. And I think that's a losing philosophy. I don't think that will exploit the most value that Bitcoin can bring to the world if we have sort of that single mission. It's an important mission, but I don't think it's everything.
I can't remember who said it. It'll come to me, but somebody said, was it Mechanic? I think Mechanic said it in his interview with Preston. I'll double check this, but I think he said, people will come to him and say, "Oh, I've lost money on Bitcoin," and they're like, "What did you buy?" "Oh, I bought this Dogecoin." And he can say, "Oh no, that's not Bitcoin.
Yeah,
that's like Dogecoin. That's like a shitcoin as elsewhere." But if they're buying tokens that are perceived to have been built on Bitcoin, they're going to believe they've lost money on Bitcoin at that point. We're saying this is built on Bitcoin. You've bought your Bitcoin, you've pegged in, you've got your fucking crab coin or whatever. And at that point, if you lose money, you'll believe you've lost money on Bitcoin. And I think that was a fair kind of observation. I think that was one of the reasons. I also think it's like, I think part of it is this desire. There's like there's multiple subcultures in Bitcoin, right? Yeah. There is like super hardcore maxi, which I'm not one. Then there is kind of Bitcoin only,
sure,
which I kind of think I am. Like I'm in that crowd. And then you've got like Bitcoin people who crypto, and then crypto people. Like there's a whole scale. But the way we had it up until a couple of years ago is like it was basically hardcore Bitcoiners, and then like there were some crypto people who had Bitcoin and vice versa. But it was essentially kept apart. Sure. It's like you can do all your crazy shit over there. We're just gonna sun our balls and hodl our Bitcoin, right? And now all this crazy shit feels like it's coming into it because it's coming into our podcasts, it's coming into our events. You got wizards jumping in swimming pools at conferences.
Those damn wizards.
Those damn fucking wizards. But like it's that these two cultures are being forced together. And I think that's like my observations, that's where it's like become a bit of a challenge. Because it's like, oh shit, you're in our culture. Udi's getting main interviews at conferences, and that used to be for some like protocol developer. And so the culture's being kind of messed up.
So I think I would amend your description of that a little bit. Yeah. I think you have it correct, but I think there's one period before it where a lot of the stuff was on Bitcoin. Like Counterparty on its own, tens of thousands of tokens, and they're dead now, but that was sort of a precursor to all these tokens on Ethereum and also kind of simultaneous with it. All this stuff was on. The Liquid network has thousands of tokens. Nobody cares about them, but they exist kind of on Bitcoin. RSK trying to build something very similar. So all this stuff was on Bitcoin, and then kind of people moved away from Bitcoin and they built this massive DeFi ecosystem on other chains, Ethereum and Solana. And so now it's not like it's coming to Bitcoin for the first time. It's just there are a lot newer people who haven't experienced some stuff before when it was on Bitcoin. And so now they're like, I got into Bitcoin only to hold Bitcoin, COVID, inflation. That's all I care about. Why are you bringing these shitcoins here? When really it's kind of a return to tradition. It's this like, people use the phrase Bitcoin Renaissance, but it's like kind of reviving some things that were a part of the culture on Bitcoin years ago, kind of faded away a little bit. And now we want to bring it back to try and put Bitcoin back at the epicenter of everything in crypto. Like, leave everyone to do their crazy stuff on other chains, but like if they do anything useful, let's bring it back to Bitcoin. And I think they found something, like Willem said at the beginning of the show. People have found things on other chains they enjoy using. Let's bring those to Bitcoin so people use Bitcoin with these permissionless, decentralized, in various ways to various degrees, applications, all powered by using Bitcoin.
Yeah, I do though think it's mainly a culture issue.
I think it is a culture issue. And I think that, so what you said about Mechanic, I think his comments, I'm sure, I know that was a paraphrase, but Bitcoin isn't supposed to solve people losing money on bad investments. People always make bad, if you look at stocks, and at least US stock markets, like something like 75, 80% of stocks have a lifetime return of zero. Like stocks go to zero, coins go to zero. People will lose money. And I think part of the...
Hold on, let me just wind back a second. Okay. I don't agree with the analogy.
Okay.
Because when you're buying a stock, you're at least researching a company that maybe has a product, has cash flow, has dividends. You're buying equity in a thing that mainly exists, right? Some of them can be shit, but it does. Like 99% of these tokens are just, there's nothing behind them. They haven't created anything. They haven't created something that people are using.
Well, so I would agree. I think a stock that was sold to zero, their investors would probably agree they didn't create anything of value either.
But what I'm saying is that it's the like these stocks are the equity in a company
Sure.
that has a balance sheet and a P&L and are making something which they sell. These tokens, they're just, I mean, now we've just got to the point where it's like meme token launch, up, down, dead, layers.
It's not a perfect analogy by any means. Sorry, that's not what I was trying to communicate. I'm just saying people will make bad investments and lose money in stocks, in commodities, in tokens, whatever. So if you, like Mechanic was saying, if you use Bitcoin, you buy something on Bitcoin, you lose money. I think it's a pretty big reach to say people will blame Bitcoin for buying a token on Bitcoin and then losing money.
Dude, they blame Bitcoin for not buying Bitcoin. It's already happening. I've heard it. The other day, some girl got in touch with me. It's a fucking depressing story on Facebook. She asked me to reach out to her. I can dig out the message. And she was like, I need to talk to you. My husband's lost loads of money on Bitcoin. She sees me as the Bitcoin guy. So I get in touch. She didn't touch Bitcoin at all. It was like one of these, what is it called? MLM, multi-level marketing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was basically like a one coin. It was, or maybe even was one coin. I can't remember. Guy's lost loads of money. He's been asking people to give him money, all his friends and family, and lost all their money. She contacted me because she thought he'd lost it on Bitcoin. So it does happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think some of these people will associate Bitcoin with losing money in crypto just because Bitcoin by far is the largest mind share. Like people think Bitcoin, they think crypto, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. Of course, in situations where people lose money, that's, I don't want anyone to lose money. It's kind of an unfortunate reality. Like it's unavoidable in many cases. But I think it's a dangerous mindset to adopt that just because people will buy into scams that may or may not in various ways be associated with Bitcoin, then we shouldn't try to build things on Bitcoin.
No, I'm just saying this. I'm
not arguing with you. I'm just arguing with the idea. And I think if people believe that sincerely, like Mechanic or others, then maybe they don't want to replace the fiat system. Maybe they don't want Bitcoin to take over the world. Maybe they want to leave the financial system as it is now, and they just want Bitcoin to be payment channels, and that's it. That's not a world I'm happy with. Like, I think that's far too limited of a view. Maybe they don't want Bitcoin to be this black hole sucking in everything in the world, but I do. I think that's Bitcoin's mission: separate money and state, be an internet for money, and build everything on Bitcoin. And people will lose money in that process, but that's the mission. And I think most people support that.
It's a culture clash.
Yeah,
and that's what we're going through. It's a culture clash that's potentially leading to desires for new opcodes, soft forks.
Sure.
And that's where it's going. I think that's where the fight will be had, because it's really interesting. Even this like inscriptions and ordinal saying that split people, because previous to them, like we were a bunch of Bitcoiners, right? Yeah. Now you've got Bitcoiners who are pro ordinals and inscriptions, and like I talked to Nick at Luxor a lot.
I love Nick. Yeah,
Nick, a fucking great guy, right? Big shout out to you, Nick. He was trying to get me to have a wizard. I'm like, I'm not fucking having a wizard. I was like, okay, I kind of want a wizard. But like, he's pro this stuff. I mean, I get why he's in the mining world as well, so it's good for mining revenues. But Rob Hamilton is at the same time.
Great guy.
So naturally, I think what's happened is the Bitcoin community is getting more and more fragmented by ideas that people like or don't like. And, how does Bitcoin cope with this? How does the culture cope with this? How do we ensure that we don't get a soft fork that has some unintended consequence that fucks Bitcoin?
Sure.
And that's a challenge.
I mean, like soft forks are always a challenge. I think.
Let me word it differently. Before, it was opcodes that made Bitcoin better as Bitcoin. We might want people to want opcodes or soft forks because they want to do something with ordinals, or they want to do something with something you might want to do, like bring some kind of token. So it's changed the kind of the market of ideas for what we do at a protocol level, and there can be some influence at that level to do things that maybe is an opcode that isn't as good for Bitcoin as money, but is better for Bitcoin as for inscriptions. And that, I think, is where you could get to another civil war.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would say two things really quick, and then I'll let you answer. I've been talking a lot the past few minutes here. I think, yeah, soft forks will always be contentious. I think some of the, we all know the new opcode that's under discussion right now. I think
Meow.
there will definitely be some contention there. But you use the word like fragmented for the community. And I don't know if I'd represent, like I understand what you're saying, but I don't know if I'd represent it that way. I would say the community is just becoming bigger. There's more people with different ideas. And I think that's a hugely positive thing because people love Bitcoin again. Like they're excited about building and experimenting and trying crazy things on Bitcoin. And for the past few years, that dynamic in the culture was just not there. So I think that the fragmentation, contention, whatever, I think it's exciting. It's part of building a decentralized, permissionless global financial system. And I hope, we see a little bit more of it, not maybe to the extent of the block size wars, but contention is a little bit of a good thing. Monolithic culture for like what Bitcoin is trying to do would be a sign of unhealth.
Yeah, I think coming back to the soft forks, I think it's always a balance. We have $1 trillion asset that can absolutely change the world, do extremely good for 8 billion people. So you want to be very hesitant on what you do with that, and I think that's generally accepted in the Bitcoin world. But on the other hand, there's possibilities to maybe improve Bitcoin. And where I stand, I would say like we first want to see big demand. Like which soft fork actually can do a lot of things, not just because it's cool, but which one can actually like massively improve something that helps the whole world, right? And yeah, that first has to be shown, I think. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. On the other hand, we have the Spiderchain. We don't need a soft fork. We could be helped by a soft fork, but we're also very much aware that it's very risky. And from the cryptography world, I know that like there's so many algorithms that get broken after tens of years. Like triple dash was invented in the 80s, got broken in 2016. So that's like 36 years later. And so even when you do the most amount of analysis on certain soft forks, you never really know what it entails. So there has to be a huge amount of demand for it, market demand, where you can actually show, look, this will improve the world massively and is worth the risk.
How do you think do you think we can bring people back together? Do you think there's a world that can exist where Pierre Rochard and Udi are on the same?
So I would say definitely not, for the reason that, using a different example, I'm never going to be on the same page with hackers in North Korea who use Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is for everyone, and everyone's not going to agree on everything. And I don't think that's the point. Like people in Bitcoin should not agree on everything.
That's fair. Good answer.
I think we should try and build things on Bitcoin for everyone. Like we said, there's 8 billion people in the world. I want them all to use Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. And that's a lot of different use cases. And I think we should build all of them on Bitcoin. I don't think necessarily everything should be built on Bitcoin. I think everything people want to use their money for should be powered by and built on Bitcoin. And that's a lot of stuff.
I think powered by Bitcoin it's a better way of putting it than built on Bitcoin.
Okay. Bitcoin aligned, powered by Bitcoin. We can, some semantic differences there. One thing I will add, I can't remember exactly where he said it, but Adam Back said something like build on Bitcoin or go home. And that's probably the tagline that best describes my vision, our vision at Botanix Labs. Because, I mean, a lot of people are building on Ethereum. A lot of people are building on Solana. Bitcoin's it for me. Like, so you describe the different camps of Bitcoin maxis. I'm definitely not like the puritanical type, but I care about Bitcoin more than any other crypto asset, any other money in the world. So yeah, build on Bitcoin or go home. That's my ethos.
Is this becoming an existential threat to Ethereum and Solana? Is there
I hope so.
But is there like fear within those camps?
Not yet, because they don't necessarily, it's very early. They don't necessarily understand what we're trying to do. But so exactly what you just mentioned is also, we talked about questions that we get about what we're building. People ask like, so how do you think about your other L2 competitors or sidechain competitors or whatever? I don't see them as competitors at all. Our competition, first and foremost, in Bitcoin is the fiat financial system. Secondly, for like this scaling Bitcoin, it's Ethereum and Solana. Like bring that liquidity back to Bitcoin. Make Bitcoin not just like whatever it is, like 50, 60% of the crypto market, 90, 95, 98, 100%. Like that's the goal. Like Bitcoin should beat out everything because it's the best. And we want in like this one particular way to make it even better. So other L2s aren't our competitors. Ethereum is the competition.
But if I was hardcore Ethereum at the moment, I would be recognizing this transition of people moving across to building things on Bitcoin, building the things that were built on Ethereum and Solana on Bitcoin. I would recognize that. I would see devs moving. I'd see brain power moving. I'd be seeing money moving. I would see it's like the writing on the wall.
Sure.
No, absolutely. I think it's still early because like there's no products yet. Like nothing is really on mainnet yet, and not a lot of the liquidity has moved over. But 100%, if you are an Ethereum developer today of an existing dApp or a new one, and you can choose with exactly the same code, you can deploy it on Ethereum main chain, huge amount of competition, or you can deploy it on top of like something like the Botanix Labs EVM or the Spiderchain EVM with the same amount of code, but now you have access to $1 trillion. What do you choose? And eventually that will play out. And that's why Bitcoin is a black hole. Everything will come back to Bitcoin.
Okay. The proof of stake that exists within Spiderchain, how's that going to work?
Yes, very interestingly, there's a big difference between a proof of stake on the second layer and proof of stake on the base layer. Proof of stake has a lot of different downsides, both from security-wise and economic-wise. Economic-wise, the big issue with proof of stake is
centralization.
Exactly. It's a closed system. Like you have 100% of the assets. The stakers will get more and more or bigger percentage of that asset over time. Now, if you build a proof of stake with Bitcoin...
Hold on, and has that provably happened on Ethereum?
It's probably happened on other systems. I can't exactly know about the numbers on Ethereum. I have to look at the latest.
When you think about it, all the rich Ethereum holders would obviously
Get richer.
Yeah, get richer.
Exactly.
So they destroyed the Ethereum mining industry to make themselves richer.
Yeah.
Was it a land grab by the Ethereum Foundation?
I can't speak to that. I don't know. But it is a closed system.
The Ethereum community always hated miners, so I don't know if it was necessarily a land grab, but that's kind of like a tangent. Ethereum was always pretty brutal to its mining community. Not in the same way that Bitcoin hates Bitcoin miners sometimes, but they always thought of them as unnecessary baggage. And I think, they're excited to merge the POS.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so proof of stake is a closed system. Centralization trend over time. Proof of work is the opposite. It's a leaking system. The miners have to pay for electricity in the real world. And so you have a decentralization trend over time. So if you have a proof of stake using Bitcoin as a staking asset, you no longer have that centralization trend. So economic argument, way better. And then the big issues with proof of stake are randomization. So you basically, in a proof of stake, you randomly choose, okay, now you are going to build the next block, then you, and then you. It's very hard to come up with a random number in the world that you cannot game in some kind of fashion. And so there's been hundreds of white papers on how to build a random number. And a lot of companies have built their business model around it. And then you have Bitcoin. You spend 10 minutes of a huge amount of energy to come up with a random number. A perfectly random number, right? If you could game that, you can game it, but you lose a lot of Bitcoin, basically. You would lose the block reward. You can hide your block if that random number doesn't suit yourself, for example. But still, after that 10 minutes of energy, it is a random number and it's very costly to ignore that. So it's solved by actually doing that on top of Bitcoin. And then the biggest, most important thing for proof of stake is how decentralized the asset is. If you build a new proof of stake just from day one and 100% of the assets are in the same bucket, how are you ever gonna decentralize that? Now, Ethereum came from a good fashion because they first had proof of work and then went to proof of stake. But if your security of a proof of stake is dependent how decentralized your base asset is, it's very risky. And the most decentralized asset is Bitcoin. So over time, your proof of stake, this will be the most secure proof of stake that's out there because the underlying asset that being staked is Bitcoin. And then more on a cryptographic perspective, you have what's called the long-range attack, also sometimes called the nothing at stake attack. Basically, you take away your stake on one chain, you keep it on the other chain, and then you double spend or a certain type of attacks. And that is really hard to build for. And so Ethereum has built this whole Casper algorithm to basically solve for the long-range attack. Now, if you timestamp or you check in with the Bitcoin blockchain, you inherit the security against that long-range attack because basically you checkpoint into the Bitcoin blockchain. And so from all different sides, actually very interestingly, all the downsides of proof of stake are solved if you build it on a proof of work.
If Michael Saylor puts all his Bitcoin in Spiderchain, is he just going to naturally accumulate more Bitcoin there by staking it?
That's the interesting thing. Like suddenly you'll have a DeFi ecosystem on Bitcoin because all the gas fees that you'll have on the Spiderchain EVM are in Bitcoin. And so those gas fees go to the stakers. And so now suddenly you can have Bitcoin yield in some kind of decentralized, trustless fashion. So yes,
Where does the yield come from?
From the gas fees.
Yeah. So do you not have a native token in the Spiderchain for any reason?
We don't have a token. We don't need a token for the Spiderchain. There will be a lot of tokens launched on top of us. Like a lot of our ecosystem projects will launch tokens very quickly.
So how are you financing this then?
So we take 20% of all the gas fees. So when you think about Ethereum, there's like $5 billion of gas fees every year. So if you would take 20% of that, that's a big revenue.
Over time, people might not like that. And how you govern? Are you just like governed as a private company? Like, fuck you, don't use it.
I mean, if at some point we are fully decentralized and they fork out 20%, that would be great. At that point, we're very decentralized.
Okay, so that could happen.
We're like, if you're decentralized, you cannot really like do anything against that. Now, the interesting part is like, do you actually want to kick out the company that's governing the code and maintaining it or not? So I assume that will take a very long time.
Yeah, because if there is a company governing the code, what stops you taking more of the fees? You say you start at 20%, go to 30%, 40%, getting greedy.
Nothing really. Like if you think about Ethereum layer 2s, they take 100% of the fees. Liquid takes 100% of all the fees. So the 20% is actually already it's not a really breakthrough, but like quite a changing aspect in the whole crypto industry. This is the first time I think someone has built sidechains or blockchains besides the main chain, like the Ethereum layer 2s or Liquid, that doesn't take all the fees for themselves.
Sorry, go on, Zack.
No, I was just saying, you mentioned Michael Saylor moving his coins onto the Spiderchain. I was watching I don't know when this is going to be released, but your most recent episode at this point was with Michael Saylor. He said something I thought was very interesting because I haven't heard him say anything like it before. He basically said like DeFi, NFTs, all this stuff I'm pretty sure this is an exact quote. He said they're good for Bitcoin. They exist around Bitcoin. A lot of it isn't on Bitcoin, but he views them as like a positive thing for Bitcoin. And like, I kind of agree with that, but what would be better is if they existed on Bitcoin, not just like existed and then there was also Bitcoin somewhere else. So maybe he does want to move some Bitcoin to the Spiderchain. I don't know. But he sees the existence of DeFi as a positive force, like a good thing. I think the great thing would be having that on Bitcoin so he can move some coins onto the Spiderchain.
So when do you think you're going to launch?
So we're almost code complete. We'll go through an audit in the next few weeks. So I think like a month and a half, 2 months. Okay.
And you're well financed.
Yes.
Big investors. How much did you raise? Is it public?
We raised 11.5 million.
There you go. I'm probably going to not use it, but I don't care that it exists. And if other people are using it, fine. I don't care. The Bitcoin's going to end up somewhere.
Not yet.
Yeah.
One of the things we haven't really talked about is the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So the things you'll actually be able to do. So for the last 10 years, we haven't had a stablecoin. So Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, like you have on Ethereum, immediately you'll have that on day one. You'll have like institutional support, like Fireblocks. You'll have lending against your Bitcoin. So take a loan against your Bitcoin. You'll have the NFTs. You'll have bridges to the rest of the crypto ecosystem. So suddenly, instead of wrap Bitcoin on Ethereum, you can use an EVM bridge and have a decentralized fashion of wrap Bitcoin on Ethereum. We already did a Lightning integration, so you'll be able to pay Lightning invoices from your MetaMask on your phone or on your computer. Basically anything you would like. Prediction markets like Polymarket has been getting more popular, so you'll have that suddenly on Bitcoin. Perp dexes like leverage your Bitcoin 2x, 5x, and actually a lot of applications that I would use if they are on Bitcoin. So
I'm
a lot.
Interested to see the comments on this one on YouTube.
Oh, I think I know how a lot of them will go. I guess maybe we'll try and placate some of them, but let me put it this way. This is a way we haven't described it so far in this conversation. To use DeFi right now, you have to buy Ether or Solana. I don't think people should be forced to make that choice. I think you should be able to hold Bitcoin and use DeFi. You don't have to buy Ether, bring that capital and buy Bitcoin. You don't have to buy Solana, take that capital and buy Bitcoin. No longer do you have to make the choice of, I mean, these apps may be kind of cool. Maybe I don't want to put a lot of money in, but I'll put some, but I have to buy Ether to do it. You can just buy Bitcoin, do it on Bitcoin. And I think that's the choice that we're trying to not have people to force themselves to make anymore. Just buy Bitcoin and you can use it in all of these apps instead of buying Ether to do it.
Absolutely. And actually in a Ethereum world, everyone believes all the activity or the applications accrue value back to Ethereum main chain. And so I believe more applications, more activity you have on Bitcoin, the more the Bitcoin value will create. It's a little bit how in gold, 99% of the value is the store of value and then a little bit of utility. What if that utility becomes bigger? So it should be good for everyone holding Bitcoin.
You don't have a token. You're trying to decentralize. You're powering it on Bitcoin. I'm interested to see the comments because there's going to be some people go, yeah, that seems okay. And then you're going to have some people who are going to be like, no, it's fucking terrible. And I want to know why they think it is. I'll be interested to see. But
yeah, I mean, we're both on Twitter. I'm active on Twitter. You can, if you hate everything I've said,
yes, you are.
If you hate everything I've said in this episode, you can DM me or you can tweet at me publicly. I'm not in the business of necessarily changing everyone's mind. I'm not going to change everyone's mind, but I think we should try and build Bitcoin to be usable by as many people as possible for as many things as they want to do on Bitcoin. I don't want them to buy Ether to use these apps. I want them to own Bitcoin and use Bitcoin.
All right. Well, let's see what happens with this. Willem, good to meet you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank
Zach, it's been too long.
Peter, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening. See you soon.